The photo was taken by a photographer called Misha Richter, and there's actually quite an interesting interview on the Guardian website where he explains how he and Amy met and the day of the shoot. So I don't want to rehash the article completely, but it is worth a read if you're interested. And yeah, basically it just seemed like a fairly standard story. Photographer put in touch with the artist via the record label. She came down to his house, but she'd been at a wedding the night before and was 4 hours late for the shoot and having not slept, which, seems fairly par for the course. Maybe one of the most interesting things is she told Richter that she wanted to have a friend stand near the lens so that she had somebody to look at, but he was quite adamant that that wasn't going to happen. He kind of wanted her to look straight at the camera. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but I definitely think you can see a little bit of that vulnerability maybe in the picture. What are your immediate thoughts, Jamie? Do you think it's getting
Well,
in?
I'm just going to bring this conversation back to square one. So for some context for the people out there, for our audience, in preparation for this segment last week, Ollie messaged me saying something along the lines of like, yeah, mate, shouldn't need to spend too long on the album cover. It's a bit shit, isn't it? Like, no way it's getting into the club. Like, we're not letting that.
You're digging me out here, mate.
We're not letting that fucking shit fucking in. And he said it with a tone that I've just tried to reproduce there. And the tone suggested like I would instantly agree, and then we proceed to engage in a little circle jerk about how we're so cool compared to this album cover or whatever. Anyway, to cut a long story short, as you can probably tell, we disagreed and we spent the past 5 days or so arguing about it. So I wanted to launch a defence of this album cover based on your description of it just there. So think of this as like kind of a closing statement to the jury, like a procedural court drama. So Ollie,
so
you
this
suggested
is
right
that To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't want to put quite as much gravitas on it, but well, wait and see.
Okay.
So anyway, Ollie, you suggested it was a bad cover. It was unimaginative. It was boring. It's just like a photo of Amy with a name. Like, it hasn't got enough trippy graphics or whatever you look for in an album cover. I don't know. Right. So let me just explain what I see in this artwork. So as we discussed earlier on this podcast, like this album is very much indebted to the 60s girl groups that, like the Shangri-Las and the Ronettes, whoever else. If you look at their album covers, they are almost exclusively a portrait of the artist on the front. It's a classic trope of that genre. It's a classic trope of the jazz and soul and R&B genres as well that she was influenced by. So the photo of her on the front is clearly a homage to that idea. So firstly, harmony between music and artwork, 10 out of 10. Moving on, next, the iconic factor. So given Amy's musical career, right, is completely tied to her celebrity, whether you like that or not, and her sense of style, the clothes, the tattoos, the beehive haircut, it makes complete sense that the cover would focus on her and her iconic image. And it makes sense that, in turn, as time passes, that portrait itself will become iconic. And certainly, when I think of Amy, I think of that image of her looking elegant, looking maybe, as you say, slightly vulnerable, but that photo for me sums up Amy. For you, maybe, Ollie, it might be some of the grim paparazzi photos out there. I'm not sure what your preference is on this front. I will allow you the font, which I personally like but can understand some objections to. But as a whole, I think this album is iconic. The album cover story is iconic. It's conceptually rich. It belongs in the VIP section of this club. I'm almost tempted to say GOAT, but I won't seek that out. I won't say that because I always seek common ground with everyone I meet. So, judge, jury, I rest my case. This is a great album cover and it's worthy of frame posters around all the kind of student digs in the country. Yeah, what do you have to say to that?
Right. My problem with this goes back to the time that the album was released. As we've mentioned in the intro, there was a lot of crap in the charts. When I listened to stuff like Valerie and Rehab the first time, I didn't like it. So I definitely didn't like it the millionth time that I'd heard it. In my head, I kind of dismissed the record and I associated it with all the rubbish that came out at the time, which is wrong.
So you were a snob, is what you're saying?
Which is wrong, but I'm admitting that it happened.
Maturity.
I also did the same with the cover. I don't know what it is. Around that time, there were so many albums which were doing the same thing, just like boring portraits where the person looked kind of nice, and that was apparently.
Yeah, but they're not iconic. Like I don't care about Duffy's. I don't care about Duffy's like album cover because Duffy is not Amy Winehouse.
What I'm saying is,
all right,
Amy's is the best of a bad bunch, and when you compare this to some of the other portraits of that time, you can see that the photographer did a good job, but it's not VIP, lad. The originality is probably -10.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be. If it's iconic and it's the whole idea is that it isn't original, it's deliberately a pastiche of a genre that she was influenced by. It's getting VIP.
All right then, lad. I'll give you this one. You may have won this battle, but
Get
you're not
fucking
going to win the war.
Atticus, mate. There you go. Right. Well, I mean, I rest my case, judge, jury. You can make that decision. If in fact, yeah. How about this? At Diff with the Record. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, or in the comments. If you've made it this far,
let us
who
know,
is right about this
everybody
album
I've
cover?
spoken to, everybody
Who the
agrees
fuck
with
have
me,
you
lad,
spoken to about this, mate? Look, whatever. But let's leave it up to the comments. I'm gonna put a poll out on every single social media. I'm gonna put a poll out on this YouTube video and on the Spotify, if that's even possible. Probably not. Although the way the Spotify's going, they'll probably add that as a feature in the next week. Whatever. This is being settled by our audience. I've put my case forward. You've put your case forward. You know, let that be it.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll let the public decide. Like.